Welcome to Podcast Summaries, where every week we break down powerful ideas from 8 to 10 top podcasts to help you grow, heal, and thrive while saving time. If you find this summary helpful, please subscribe and check out links for more content. Your support keeps this journey going. Here is summarized version of You Can Change Your Brain. Neuroscientist explains how to rewire your mind, stop negative thoughts, featuring Dr. Caroline Leaf by Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins wants to know what Dr. Caroline Leaf would say to someone who feels trapped in negative thoughts and feels like their mind is a complete mess. Dr. Leaf explains that 95% of people struggle with negative thinking, but the good news is that it's common and can be changed. She notes that people often get stuck in negative thinking patterns because they're drawn to the imbalance it creates. Dr. Leaf identifies common negative thought patterns, such as feeling under pressure, black and white thinking, and feeling like their brain won't shut off. She emphasizes that these patterns can be changed, and that it's essential to recognize that you're not alone in feeling this way. Dr. Leaf explains that the mind is not the brain, and that the mind is the energy force that drives the brain and makes it work. She uses the analogy of a cell phone to illustrate this point, explaining that just as a cell phone needs to be charged and programmed to work, the brain needs the energy of the mind to function. Dr. Leaf notes that the mind is 99% of who we are, and that it's the prism through which life is processed. She emphasizes that the brain is just a host, and that the mind is the driving force behind our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to explain the difference between the brain and the mind, and Dr. Leaf explains that the brain is the physical structure, while the mind is the energy force that powers it. Dr. Leaf explains that the mind is constantly learning and absorbing new information, and that it has the ability to change and adapt. Dr. Leaf shares a story about a patient named Lee, who suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. Despite being told that the damage was irreversible, Dr. Leaf worked with Lee to use the power of the mind to reverse the damage. Through a 5-step process, Lee was able to restore her cognitive function, emotional well-being, and physical abilities. Dr. Leaf emphasizes that the key to this success was Lee's willingness to do the work and take control of her own mind. Mel Robbins is excited about the potential of Dr. Caroline Leaf's 5-step approach to mind management, which has been successful in helping people with traumatic brain injuries and other severe cases. Dr. Leaf explains that the mind is the key to managing stress, burnout, anxiety, and depression, and that it's essential to understand the levels of the mind. She emphasizes that the mind is not just a passive recipient of thoughts, but an active participant in shaping our experiences. Dr. Leaf shares that her approach is based on years of scientific research and has been simplified into a 5-step process that anyone can use. She explains that the mind is the driving force behind our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and that it's essential to manage our minds to achieve positive change. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to explain how labeling mental health issues, such as anxiety or depression, can be harmful. Dr. Leaf responds that labeling these issues can create a negative feedback loop, where the mind becomes focused on the label and the associated negative thoughts and emotions. She emphasizes that these labels are not fixed entities, but rather emotional warning signals that indicate a need for change. Dr. Leaf explains that trauma, anxiety, and depression are not diseases of the brain, but rather responses to adverse experiences in life. She emphasizes that the mind has the power to heal these responses by reconceptualizing and reprogramming the associated thoughts and emotions. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to explain how to use her 5-step process, called the NeuroCycle, to manage negative thoughts and emotion. Dr. Leaf also shares a technique called the 10-second pause, which involves breathing in for 2 counts, holding for 2 counts, and breathing out for 6 counts, while saying let and go to oneself. This technique helps to calm the mind and prepare it for the NeuroCycle process. Mel Robbins is excited about the potential of the NeuroCycle process to help people manage their minds and achieve positive change. Dr. Leaf emphasizes that this process is not just about replacing negative thoughts with positive ones, but about embracing and reconceptualizing the underlying experiences and emotions that drive our thoughts and behaviors. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Caroline Leaf to explain the importance of perspective in understanding our thoughts and behaviors. Dr. Leaf emphasizes that perspective is like putting on a pair of glasses. If it's broken, you can't see clearly. She encourages listeners to examine their perspective and attitude towards life, acknowledging that it's okay to be a mess and that most people walk around unhappy and just going through the motions. Mel Robbins notes that people often get stuck in talking about their problems without moving forward to find solutions. Dr. Leaf agrees, emphasizing the need to move beyond just acknowledging our thoughts and emotions to actually changing our perspective and behaviors. Dr. Leaf introduces the concept of reflection as the second step in the process. She explains that reflection involves looking at oneself in relation to the 4 questions asked earlier, using the WD questions who, what, when, where, why, and how, to gain deeper insight. She encourages listeners to be specific and organized in their reflection, using a metacog, a concept map or mind map, to visualize their thoughts and emotions. Mel Robbins shares a personal experience of using this process to gain insight into her own thoughts and emotions. She describes how she closed her eyes and imagined a past experience that triggered feelings of dread, and how this helped her to identify a deeper pattern of thinking. Dr. Leaf explains that the next step is to write down one's thoughts and emotions, using the metacog to organize and visualize them. She emphasizes the importance of being specific and focused on the present moment, rather than getting caught up in broad or general thoughts. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to provide an example of how to narrow down one's thoughts and emotions to focus on a specific issue. Dr. Leaf introduces the concept of the thinker moment, which involves shutting one's eyes, closing off the external world, and allowing the free flow of thoughts to emerge. She encourages listeners to observe their thoughts and identify the one that is most prominent in the moment. Dr. Leaf explains that the final step is to recheck and reconceptualize one's thoughts and emotions. She emphasizes the importance of finding something positive to focus on, such as a phrase or visualization, to help anchor oneself in the present moment and prevent negative thoughts from emerging. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to provide an example of how to use this process to overcome negative thoughts and emotions. She emphasizes the importance of daily practice and consistency in building new habits and overcoming negative patterns of thinking. Dr. Leaf notes that it takes 63 days to build a new habit, and that the first few days are often the hardest. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Caroline Leaf about her research and her new book, Help in a Hurry, specifically about how to stop negative thoughts and emotional spirals in just 63 seconds. Dr. Leaf explains that the key is to acknowledge the thought or emotion, rather than suppressing it or letting it build up inside. She suggests saying the thought out loud, or at least in your head, and adding a because to explain why you're feeling that way. This helps to get the thought out and start to process it, rather than letting it spiral out of control. Dr. Leaf uses the example of receiving a text message that makes you feel anxious or scared, and how to respond to it in a way that doesn't let the negative emotions take over. Mel Robbins notes that this process is like vomiting out the negative emotions, and that it's a way of taking control of your thoughts and emotions rather than letting them control you. Dr. Leaf agrees, and explains that this process is a way of driving neuroplasticity and creating new pathways in the brain. Dr. Leaf also emphasizes the importance of acknowledging and accepting your emotions rather than trying to suppress or deny them. She notes that suppression can actually make things worse, and that it's better to face your emotions head-on and work through them. Mel Robbins asks Dr. Leaf to summarize the key takeaways from their conversation, and Dr. Leaf emphasizes the importance of realizing that your mind is not your brain, and that you have the power to change your thoughts and emotions. She also notes that you can't control the events and circumstances of your life, but you can control your reactions to them. Dr. Leaf's parting words are that you have the power to change your life and your brain, and that it's never too late to start making positive changes. Mel Robbins thanks Dr. Leaf for her time and expertise, and encourages listeners to share the episode with others and to start applying the techniques they've learned. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, check out YouTube channel, and just remember, subscription is only £1 or $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.